All right, I think we have the green light to go ahead and get started, everyone. So it was Dragos' idea to do the Blues Brother routine here with the matching jackets, so that was all him.
Paid for by Adobe.
Yeah. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So thank you all for attending. We're going to talk about lean governance at Adobe, and we're specifically going to talk about the journey that we've been on for the last 4 years in our lean transformation. So we're going to be taking a very kind of view from space, very high level view. We're not going to look at Kanban boards. We're going to really look at a very, very high level. We use the term governance because we're really focused on enterprise sort of scaled knowledge work and not specifically, looking at team boards and things like that, but it's really the outer system of everything is kind of the perspective that we're approaching this from, and hopefully you'll get some interesting insights from our experience over the last.
And we have nothing to sell. You may know us as consultants. Maybe we've met many of you working either for Accenture or for CC Pace, for some other consulting or on our own consulting enterprises. We work for Adobe. We're not here to sell you anything, whether for Adobe or anybody else.
We're just here to share the good, the bad, the ugly of the last 4 years. So a little bit about us. I actually officially met Dragos in Istanbul. That's a picture of Istanbul in 2013 in July at a Train the Trainer event. I think that was Agnes's first LKU event. So that's kind of where we originally met. A little bit about me. I head up engineering operations at Adobe Commerce. And then there's kind of some tours of duty there underneath. So I approach the subject matter in this community in particular with a fairly unique perspective. So I started my career at AMD doing lean semiconductor manufacturing and doing factory automation and software development to support lean manufacturing. So I've been running Kanban systems since 1994 and been doing the lean thing and Kaizen and all of that since the early 90s. So I've just kind of stuck with it after 29 years in high tech, and that's kind of where I've come from. Did different kind of rounds of work, lean transformation at Bazaar Voice in Austin, and I spent a couple of years at Capital One, healing safe transformations with lean systems thinking. I did the same thing at FedEx for 2 years with Accenture, healing safe transformation with lean systems thinking. And then I ended up at Adobe, and along with my distinguished colleague here, who can say a few words.
Sure. I quit Microsoft, I think, around 2013 when David Anderson called me and said, hey, making enough money to afford you now, or to afford you quitting Microsoft, and let's go around the world and make this grow, right? Scale. And I did. And I think one of the first engagements I've had, I worked with Dominica de Grandes, and then next was Dave White. So I've known Dave since 2013, one of the first folks I've met. And that was my first leadership retreat. That was also my first Train the Trainer class with David in Istanbul. And it was my birthday also.
It was?
We had champagne.
We had champagne, yeah.
And the rest is history. There's a list of clients and companies I work for. I work with many of you, and I've been inspired by many of you. And I am full, but nothing else than recognition for all the interactions I've had with this community for almost 10 years now. So thank you for that. Next slide, boss.
Just
technical difficulties.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so a little bit, about Adobe. I think it should be a pretty familiar brand. It's actually a really interesting company. Founded in 1982, started out with PostScript document format, it turned into PDF, and now the three main product lines for Adobe are Creative Cloud, Document Cloud, and Experience Cloud, which each is a suite of technologies. Adobe Commerce, in particular, was an acquisition by a company called Magento Commerce in 2018. Right before we came in, Dragos and I originally came in through Accenture to do some lean systems classes. and so it's been an interesting ride ever since. So Adobe is definitely doing very well these days. Is at the forefront of global digital transformation in the creative industry, and I will say, with my experience of 29 years in the high tech industry, it is the best sort of corporate culture that I've ever been a part of and experienced myself. Focus a lot on diversity, inclusion, well-being for people, and that fits very well with our mantra, where we put well-being, people's well-being, kind of front and center in what we do. Kind of look at well-being as the seed condition for sustainable performance. So we focus a lot on the well-being concept. But a little bit more about Adobe Commerce. We're a leader in B2C, B2B, and enterprise e-commerce. We're up in the leader quadrant of the Gartner chart, and we do quite well in that space. Generally speaking, what Adobe Commerce is a set of composable sort of commerce capabilities that integrate with the rest of Adobe's product suite. And Adobe has tons of different technologies, that you would be familiar with. So it's really about composable commerce and using a set of technologies specific to a particular business. The footprint that we look after is at any time between 40 and 50 software engineering teams around the world. Dragos leads our coaching practice. So that's kind of the span that we look at is between 40 and 50 teams, maybe about 400 people or so. So it's a great place actually to work.
It's a great canvas. Oh, my slide. So what do we want to accomplish here today? Yeah, I got used, see, like habit, practice makes habit. So I practice sitting here and wake up call. We want to share. We're here to share. As I said, we have nothing to sell. I don't think either Eric or I have ever been into selling things. We've been into helping teams, organizations to get results. So we're gonna share the journey of what we've been doing, a little bit about the lean coaching practice. We will show you examples that you can ask us questions afterwards, and we'll share whatever we can share with you if you're interested. Explore some what we call contextual scaling. How do we leverage data, and how do we leverage each other and other folks in order to scale the services that are successful. We try a lot of things. Some we discard, some we grow, right? And overall journey insights. I think there's maybe one more.
No.
Or no? Okay.
So I'll talk a little bit about the journey at a high level that we've kind of been on for the last 4 years. Actually, he's going to talk about this first.
Some of you even asked me questions in the past about positioning Kanban against other methods. And I've never really played that game. I believe I used Scrum at Microsoft a couple of years before we got onto this journey. It was successful. I didn't do everything the Scrum book said. I didn't do anything Ken Schwaber said. I got certified with Ken Schwaber, I believe, in 2015. I applied what made sense to us. I modified things that didn't make sense or they were not a good fit for Microsoft or things that would get me fired. But we've had success with iterations, and the teams appreciated, and developers were resistant and said, I'm not, what? No way. And then a month later, the people who were saying those things were the biggest fans. Also, they're saying that customers are irrelevant to me as a developer. I don't want to work with them. And then when they've seen the great reduction in rework from getting quick feedback and being in front of the customer right away, they became fans as well. So, for us, Scrum worked well, but then I got a promotion. I started to work with the XIT team. That kind of nothing was really working. Not what they were doing. I figured Scrum was not a good fit because priorities were changing every day, so on and so forth. You've read about it. So overall, about 2 or 3 years ago, I inserted this slide even in some of the train-the-trainer classes that I've done for Lean Kanban University, where I was transmitting this message. And I think it's very important message because people, they always ask you for tools, right? From a complexity theory perspective, right? Everybody wants a step-by-step guide on how to do something. Well, I said, what are the problems that you have, right? You have different options. What would work for you? What would not work for you? So methods really for me, the output of methods, the output of learning is to be smarter so you can ask better questions, which is on the right? Answers emerge as a result of asking better questions. So what are the questions, when you learn something new, what are the questions that you can ask now that before you didn't know to ask, right? I go in front of a new organization or a new client when I was doing consulting. Right away they would say, we would talk about the theory, and the next thing they would say, well, we don't have any data to show you that. Yes, you do. And it's actually right there in Jira, right? They would say, we don't know what our demand rates are. Well, how many tickets do you create per week, per month, per quarter for this category, this category? Oh, we never looked at it that way, right? But because they never looked at it any other way, for a team of 30 people, they had something like 400 to 500 things in progress. So that's the essence of this slide. So one of the takeaways, and I'm happy, Eric had exceptional content when I joined Adobe. He already created a lot of content. He joined about 2 years before I joined. And this is something that, we agreed to insert and add because it's very simple, yet it's very powerful, we believe. Happy to take feedback or questions on it. So that's this slide. That's what it's about.
Yeah, I think a key heuristic that we use is asking a lot of questions as a way of moving forward. So we definitely do that. So just a kind of a graphic of our journey, starting in 2018. Those spiky things on the road there are major context changes. And there have been a lot of them. The big spiky thing in the middle is the pandemic. All right, we all had that big spiky thing. But we started back in November of 2018, and we came in both through Accenture into Adobe Commerce and did the first Lean Systems workshop. And that was kind of the genesis of all of this. And then I joined in March of 2019. So that the transformation effectively began there. And then Dragos continued to fulfill the Accenture engagement and continued to train across all of our engineering teams throughout 2019. Made several trips to Austin. And
I did about 13 trips, about 1 week each. So yeah, from December 2018 through the end of 2019. So I got to meet about 250 people or so of the 400. And we trained most of the teams.
Yeah, it was interesting because I joined and then he was still embedded as a consultant, and then we worked together even from late 2018 actually. So then 2020 hits. Obviously, the pandemic changes the game for everybody. We have to go to a digital first sort of approach to all of our training and coaching, right? Because everything was remote. So that was an adaptation that was forced upon us. We had to be really good at digital first everything, right? And I don't think we're quite going back. I mean, I'm the biggest fan of, giant boards on the wall in front of the VP's office, but I don't know that we're going back there really, at least the way that it was before. We got really good at what I call archaeology. So kind of the uncovering things through the static exercises and documenting these things in a wiki in a very structured way. We had to do that when everything was remote. And that turned out to be a really good, adaptation that was forced upon us, where we started creating templates in the wiki that we would then use to sort of bootstrap different engagements or, just kind of get leverage in certain areas. So we got really good at building these templates, these simple templates that we would use.
That's I think is part of the context. We were not creating templates to simplify what we do or to say everybody use this template. We'll show you these templates. We'll show you examples. The templates are really about what questions you ask. See? So the context, the answers would emerge. And then every once in a while I go and I add another column or add some other questions. And the templates evolve. They're not static. I would say probably there are changes in that template, maybe not after every workshop, but probably at the end of each engagement. So we'll talk about it. But we don't position our services the way we did in consulting with training, coaching. No, it's like, what do you need help with? So we start with a workshop. Actually, I have slides to talk about that. So back on the journey.
Another interesting thing, a set of problems that we realized is all around data. And so, we had to explicitly create an ethics around the use of data. And we had to democratize the data. And we had to let teams know that the data is not for leadership to judge you, it's for you to self-manage. In fact, if you have any hope of, kind of whatever we call self-management or self-organization, then that has to be driven from transparency and empirical inspection. And you need to understand what these metrics are saying. So we put a lot of effort into democratizing the data. We put a lot of effort into the dialogue around ethics and bias in the data. I'll talk about some problems using data, but this has been one of probably the key stabilizing aspects about our transformation is to have a healthy relationship to data and a healthy dialogue in the organization about the data.
And I would add and relate to what was said earlier. We are actually keenly focused on working ourselves out of the job of a coach and trainer with these engagements. We have no interest in being a fixture. We want to add value, outcomes driven, and then move on. They know where to find us if they want to follow up.
So kind of going down the road, 2021, early 2021, Dragos joins officially, and we start building a lean coaching practice, which is another interesting side effect of the transformation. Is it was successful to the point where we got basically investment to create a coaching practice, a lean coaching practice, and Dragos leads that practice today. So that's kind of cool. That had never existed before in Adobe, a lean coaching practice, but we created it from the efficacy that we had in our lean transformation. You see the spiky things continue. The whole sort of department is eliminated. Major reorgs happen. Leaders come and go. It's like we shouldn't be surprised by these things. And while we don't want to maybe encourage, reorganization for, to make cross-functional teams, reorgs are going to happen. To quote Robin Williams in the Dead Poets Society, "'Twas always thus and always thus will be." Right? We're always going to have reorgs. We're not going to be able to stop that. So we need to be resilient in the face of these changes. We need an adaptive capability to absorb these changes and be okay. Right? And so we focus a lot on resiliency. So the real problem, I think, again, when we're talking about scaled knowledge work, is that the organization is constantly changing. It's a living entity. It's never not changing, and it's never going to be completely stable. Therefore, it is helpful to focus on resiliency and adaptability to be able to overcome those changes.
And I would add, I would say the first time it occurred to me that my job is to work myself out of a job was also at Microsoft, and was actually a precursor to the XIT experience, if you want, where I realized that Microsoft, we had a major reorg every, I would say, you could have 2, sometimes you could have 3 major reorgs a year. The IT department was about 7,000 people. We had about 4,000 systems in production. And you always had different vendors trying to get in and displace some of the employees, or there are always lines of business changes. Now we're going to align, with this domain, with this product group, or, what have you. And I realized that, okay, I have to work myself out of this job before the job is not going to exist. I think that was my initial thinking. But then it really evolved into a matter of scaling. How, if I work myself out of a job, so the fear went away, but it started with fear, right? And then that fear went away and was displaced by value. What if I can help others do this? And I can go and do some other exciting things, which Microsoft was full of.
Okay, so the concept of lean governance, this is a depiction of what that means for us, and it shows a structural component here. It doesn't show all the complexity that's there. So starting on the left, just some key kind of things that we focus on in our coaching practice and how we consult the organization. We focus a lot on language. I know Mike Burrows focuses a lot on language. Mm-hmm. But if we're not using the same terms, it's just not going to work out. So we have to really take a step back sometimes and say, let's concentrate on the language that we're using and make sure that we're actually speaking the same language as it relates to the way that we work. Critical thinking supersedes everything else. It supersedes methods, frameworks, heuristics. Critical thinking. If something's not working, then we're going to ditch it or we're going to change it. So language and critical thinking actually turn out to be some of our most valuable heuristics that we use. And then we use a lot of patterns. We try to take simple patterns from wherever they come from. We apply them and we adapt them in context. That's kind of how we, that's kind of our scale-free approach to scaling, is using simple patterns and adapting those patterns in context. So lean demand architecture is the service orientation and the network that David spoke about earlier. That's what we call lean demand architecture, and I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. We focus a lot on the tooling and the data aspect. I really have found over the years that it's been rare that I've seen really effective tooling applied at large scale. A lot of times we're fighting against the tooling, and it makes things almost impossible. So we really have to have an intentional strategy to the tooling and the data specifically, I have found in our case. And then we acknowledge complexity in our environment. We understand that we can't control everything. That we seek to understand the present is really the focus there, and not so much the to be picture, but as is. We really want to understand that to know what direction we need to head in, what heuristics we need to apply, and then we apply data science, really, which is, I think these days, table stakes for running a technology organization. We have to understand data science. So the structural pieces here show in the upper right we have an OKR system that we use. So we have OKRs that are scoped to half year. We have quarterly OKRs, and we have a monthly review of those. And so our high-level strategy gets deployed sort of down from those objectives and key results. Then we have a portfolio level, a program level, and a team level. And that just simply shows those three levels. Very standard three-tiered architecture there. So we do a monthly boardwalk on the portfolio system. We do weekly, program syncs at the program level. And these are typically epics. So portfolio epics in the portfolio system, program epics in the program system, and then story, tasks, and bugs at the service level or the team level down below. So each system has a set of feedback loops that manage risk and create flow in the system. But you see the linkage between the KRs and either portfolio epics or program epics. So we explicitly link those together, because a lot of times you'll find that OKRs can be incongruent with, if you go look at how the work is set up in your system, there can be an incongruence there. So we try to explicitly link this piece of work or this investment is designed to move the needle on this particular KR.
And we favor simplicity, right? Again, it's a pattern. It doesn't mean that we are forcing all the teams, all the programs, all the portfolios to work exactly the same way. We show them the pattern, and then they experiment with some of the things. They release some, they let go of certain things, other things they find valuable. But overall, people find it valuable and they come ask for more. And they say, hey, I have an idea, and then we incorporate that. We explore with them different themes, we experiment. If it's successful, then we incorporate it in what we do.
So just to add on the scaling concept of the prior slide, this is what I refer to as auto scaling, which is just like in cloud architecture, right? So you capacity expands and contracts as needed. I kind of see the organization as exhibiting similar characteristics. Again, because the system is always changing, people are always coming and going, teams are forming and disintegrating. So at the bottom it says emergent demand architecture, whose nodes, the same nodes that David referred to in the kind of the service-oriented architecture, the connections can exist ephemerally. The nodes and the connections can exist on a short-term basis, right, for days or weeks, or sustainably for months or years. But again, they're always changing. The nodes in the network are coming and going. The connections between the nodes are being created and being destroyed. So there's a demand architecture on the left that is representing like kind of how we want to set up everything in the tooling. But then we also recognize we have informal networks that are at play that sort of overlay that demand architecture. And that's people making connections with one another, working together outside of the system. So we try to understand and study the informal networks and the connections where problem solving happens. And we integrate that into our coaching practice as well. So we're not naive enough to think that the system is purely codified in the demand architecture. We're constantly trying to force the system to be codified in demand architecture, but we put a lot of attention on the informal networks and the relationship aspect of what we do too.
And it sounds a lot more complicated than it is. We're having a lot of fun, and actually the people we work with have a lot of fun, and for us fun is part of it. Like if it feels like you're dragging and it's like boring, it's like, hold on a second, it's a sign. Like let's explore this, let's unpack and see what's going on here, what do we need to change.
So here are just some different heuristics that we use. This is a little bit messy, as is our entire operation is a little bit messy, but it kind of works. So I'm just going to cherry pick a couple of things that are particularly relevant to how we go about transformation. So the boldest words there, so lean, knowledge, work, and Kanban systems is the cornerstone, right, of our systems thinking approach. It's table stakes, right? Kanban systems are table stakes these days. We have this idea of the efficacy imperative, which is to say that the only thing that justifies practice is efficacy. Right? If we can't produce the intended result, then we need to change something, regardless of what framework or what method it comes from. Efficacy is the judge and the jury of everything that we do. So if it works, we amplify it. If it doesn't work, we change it or we get rid of it. That's really a kind of a golden rule in what we do. There's the language of critical thinking piece at the top. Again, we focus on relationships a lot. And then down below, the tooling and the data, just to underscore that one more time, I've got a note there that says it's where the war is won or lost. If we don't sort of coherently implement technology and have a coherent and healthy relationship with data, then generally we're going to be fighting an uphill battle and we're not going to achieve the level of efficacy that we're really pursuing there. So we use a collection of different heuristics and things, patterns and heuristics. Again, it's messy, but it works because we focus on efficacy.
All right, so we spoke about this so far a bit, at the high level as a model, right? So let's take a look at a couple of examples. And lean, what do you mean when you say lean coaching practice? It started, I would say, with that engagement when we came in to do workshops in 2018. Then Eric joined, and then as a result, we have 5 coaches, and some of this growth was organic from a reorg where we've got 2 former program managers with a lot of experience. One had 14 years of experience in Adobe. It's very significant, brilliant. Everybody is really passionate about their work. And then we did hire this year, beginning of this year, a coach in Bucharest, Romania, and a coach in Barcelona, in Spain. And the coach in Barcelona is actually a big fan and from the Kanban community, Jaume Jornet. I don't know if it rings a bell, but in Spain he's considered Mr. Kanban. Okay, that's what we've been told. Exceptional, very good. Simple, adaptive, pattern-based coaching. Again, it's a summary of everything Eric described. We focus on simplicity, we focus on efficacy and results, data. Right? What is the data showing us? We'll show you examples, rich examples shortly. Evidence-based learning, we learn and adapt continuously. Things that Eric or I may have been attached at some point and we brought it in. It's like, oh yeah, this is going to make a difference. Some of those things sometimes flop, right? And then we see the interest from the teams. We see patterns that teams have in their behaviors and daily interactions. And we say, ooh, let's figure out a soft way to showing them something that could raise their interest to change what they do. We don't go and tell people what to do. We expose them to different things. We have conversations, right? Explicitly promoting well-being. I think if you work with Eric or I, you know that that's always been our intent. We look at work as time that we spend a whole lot more than we spend with our families and with our friends and with the things that perhaps we enjoy, like hobbies. So we don't, it's like I don't feel like I'm working. I don't feel like I've been working ever. Sometimes it gets challenging. I work hard. I put no matter how many hours or effort, but at the end of the day, I'm looking at how people respond around me and how we can make that better. So we can move on to show you something more tangible. So one thing that you heard already being mentioned by one of us here is I think fitness review. I think we may have referred to it as one of the feedback loops that we have. So what is a fitness review practice? Actually, the objectives and the fitness metrics are cut and paste from our page where we have this service displayed. On that page, we also have a calendar. It's a 4-week cycle. So we have a meeting every Wednesday morning. It's first thing in the day at 8 a.m. However, teams present every 4 weeks. At some point, we've had 5 teams. Now we're back to 4. And the 4 teams are listed to the right where it says 4-week cycle. So those are the 4 teams. The roles that we have, you see below, we have the manager of the team, we have a senior manager, we have a practice lead, director, the coaches. And by the way, these meetings are open. Anybody can attend anyone's meetings. Everybody actually in the organization has it on their calendar if they want to participate or not. And then they look at this calendar to see who's presenting when. The practice lead role is a role predominant for the US teams. In Barcelona, for example, they prefer the managers, in their smaller teams maybe, the managers prefer to act in that practice lead role. So we don't say that practice lead has to be a person, we just describe what the practice lead does, right? Which is pretty much looking after continuous improvement practices that you're familiar with from the Kanban method, and perhaps presenting the metrics that we have, and Eric will show you shortly. So this approach has been really the short conclusion at the end on the lower right side of the slide. I have seen this evolved. I don't know, for how long have you been doing this before I joined, a year ago or so?
Since I started in 19.
So what do you have to say? Because I've seen improvement since I started, and I was surprised to see. So how did this start, and what was the initial reaction from teams, Eric?
Well, initially there was a lot of resistance to this, and there was a lack of understanding of the data, and that's where I'll get into the problems of interpreting and utilizing the data. But for us, this has been one of the stabilizing things about our transformation, and has been key to sustained positive change for us. And I think this really established a precedent for transparency and understanding without judgment. And so this has been just a key stabilizing factor in our journey.
What is your experience with fitness metrics or feedback loops, like retrospective meetings maybe? Any positive, negative, so-and-so? Sometimes you work with clients, some teams are disengaged, they come there and it's like a drag. They say we have too many meetings, including these retros, they're not useful. Happens? Yeah. Let me tell you in one word, and it just occurred to me, this is not scripted. One word, if I describe the fitness review, is enthusiasm. It still surprises me how enthusiastic managers are, how enthusiastic everyone is, because they don't come there to be, they're not afraid of being judged. Even though the head of our department, the highest level person, and sometimes we have high level people from partner organizations that may join and watch this, nobody's judging. They say, wow, that's interesting. So, and then if someone is presenting something where you see some trends going, that way, not very exciting when they go down into the right? Everybody wants to see maybe things improving. If it's a backlog, it's not a good thing to go back. But you know what, you get what I mean, right? The person who's presenting is the first one to say why and what they're doing about it, or if they need help. It's a very, very healthy conversation. But the enthusiasm surprises me. After 10 years of coaching, consulting, training worldwide with all different industries, this gets to a point where I'm like, this is it. This is it. I don't know how long it's gonna last. I don't know what's gonna happen a couple of years from now. Other reworks, different people, who knows? But this is it. Right? To see people enthusiastically come and talk about metrics, about results, about outcomes, about challenges, right? And they do things that we don't even talk about. They come, some teams, they do a summary, they prepare, they rehearse, they have a meeting. They get excited, maybe because they're distributed and they have people all over the place. Hey, let's get together. And by the way, this fitness review that's done once a week with the leadership, where we have the leadership present, right? They review those metrics in the retros, and we have retros every 2 weeks.
Another really great thing about this is our leaders are present and they have come to adopt the behavior of saying, what do you need? How can we help in this forum? Instead of, why are you not doing the right thing? What can we do to help you?
Yeah, and this occurred to me, it was not intended. It was not, I don't think it was intended by either one of us. But what I noticed and what I'm able to tell others is that you're able to put this type of feedback loop in place. The trust in the organization builds up. It doesn't start with a lot of trust because the leadership present, they feel, oh, I'm going to be judged. And they're like, they didn't say anything. They didn't judge me. They didn't comment. And then it happens again. And then they see someone else being helped. And they hear stories how leadership actually, hold on a second, I can fix this for you. What's going on? Tell me more. Let's have a follow-up after this call. And then the leaders take it, they run with it, they have a follow-up, and things improve. So we can go to the next slide. If someone would have told me 10 years ago or 10 months ago that you're going to be a big fan of creating templates, I had to say, yeah, right. Me? Templates? Man, I created more templates than I've created my whole life. And this is one of them. It is on a wiki page. It has 3 parts. And it will be in the slides. I'm not going to go in, I'm just going to keep it at a high level. We call this the pre-workshop discovery. I just got an email this morning from a manager who says, hey, remember me and my team? Data solutions is like, we'd like to have a refresh. I have new people, our scope of, we have some new challenges, and we'd like to go through the workshop, right? Like, now we're discussing about options. So right as soon as I get a call like that, I schedule a pre-workshop discovery call. Could be with the manager, could be with the whole team, could be with other coaches that we're ramping up or participating or collaborating. Product could be there. We say, hey, what do we need to have here? Let's talk about these challenges that you have. Who do you like to invite? Could be dependent teams, codependent, interdependent, could be anybody, right? Let's have them. Let's have a conversation. How are we going to make this work? We're trying to solve a problem. We're not trying to push training or anything. So from there, we go to the actual workshop, archaeology and design. But you see, archaeology and design, it's, it as static, okay? Static. You recognize static? However, because of time, because of the nature, because of COVID and time constraints, we are conducting 4 exercises. There could be, these exercises could be interlaced with slides where you teach some theory before or after, right? Briefing or debriefing on the concept. Or if we work with a team with whom we've had the workshop already, we review that theory up front, and then we do this in a chain, one after the other. And they go a lot faster. We also have some post-workshop exercises, and they're not all listed here. Those can be numerous, and we're still adding that to our service catalog. Next, what you see in the upper left corner is a screenshot from Trello. And the very first column, which is not meant to be explicit, but that very first column on the left are the templates we have in Trello. So there's expanded below. So can I go to click? Right, and you see it's a template. You can click on the upper blue thing there, and then it creates a new entry on the Trello board. But this is only for coaches right now. This is only for coaches, but this is where we might be taking notes, where we have a pre-workshop discovery. Actually, this is for the post-workshop coaching. So I'm showing the example of the very first one, the very, the second template, right? So you see we have coaching outcomes. Now, while this is a template, it's editable. As a result of that pre-workshop discovery, the coach, in collaboration with the team members, they edit and they say, what are the outcomes that we want to have? Not from training, but from our collaboration, which is a combination of training and coaching. And whatever feedback we discover is not set in stone. They can modify it at any given point in time. But there's one other thing I want to point out to. You see somewhere to the right where it says there's another section that says 4 to 8 weeks coaching pattern. Hey, it may be 2 weeks. It may end up being 3 months. But the point is that we're there to work ourselves out of that coaching training job. I'm not going to be here forever. What do you need to be self-sufficient? That's it. And we identify them. Oh, there's one other thing. Go back all the way to the bottom. It's very important to me. This part of the language is very important. Where it says it's the completing the coaching engagement. We make a decision to complete the coaching engagement, and we engage to disengage. I didn't come up with this brilliant phrase, but I love it. Engage to disengage. I've heard this from a leadership coach I've had when I was at Taverna, part of a leadership team. Engage to disengage. Very powerful. You ask me questions after the presentation if you want. More templates if you want that we've created. How do we run retros? There you go, every 2 weeks. On the left side, you see again something we have as an example. It's in our slides, in the training materials. And then on the right-hand side, you have an example from Microsoft Planner. You familiar with Planner? Very easy to use, Microsoft Planner. If you have Office 365, it's free. You can create your own columns. You can name them whatever you want. You can, very cool. But that's pretty much, we use it. This team was called Party Parrots. And hint, if you type party as the name of the team, it's going to show you some background pictures that have to do with party. But if you type parrots, then it shows you pictures of parrots. Anyway, so that's how we run the retros. And moving on, this is pretty much in summary for the retro. One other thing that we introduced, I also, in the last couple of years, I got certified as an ORSC trainer coach, Organizational Relationship System Coaching. They do something called the Designing a Team Alliance. And I've done this twice. We've done it with the leadership team, the top leadership team we have. We also done it ourselves as our coaches, and we're rolling it out as a model to work with other teams. We've done this as an experimentation, if you want, right? And we expanded in what ORSC model shows. And what I say it's important is we're asking 4 questions. And based on those 4 questions, people, in this case we use Miro, that look like sticky notes. Before we are doing this in person, you'll have this in the slides. Eric came up with these categories: culture, complexity, behavior, commitment. The questions are fairly simple. So after we collect this feedback, we don't triage them right away. We go, and after people come up with the sticky notes, you see the bottom row where we ask them to come up with some short statements, right? Say, hey, how do we want our relationship to be or not to be? So then for each one of those 4 questions, they summarize and they come with a couple of bullets. So let's go to the next slide. Well, the next question we say, well, how do you know we have that? Whatever we want to accomplish. And we come up with the purple looking top row notes. So then I say, okay, so now that we have this information, what do we do? So we take all those sticky notes, the yellow sticky notes on the left under so what, thank you. Then I'm starting to come up with categories. Now I want to make a very clear distinction. I'm not coming up with some buckets. What you see at the right, those 5 different things, let's think of them as buckets. They're not predefined. I'm starting to look at this and I do some affinity grouping by using colors. See, I leave them in place where they are on the board, but I'm starting to use colors. And then I'm trying to come up together with other folks to come up with some labels. What do these colors represent? We see some themes here. And then we come up with those themes. And the themes that you see, I appreciate your help with the pointer, but end up something like we put in a word cloud, right? You see like accountability, you can't see, but I'll tell you, accountability and growth came up 34 times versus scientific thinking that came up 10 times. However, these are the ones that elevate up to a level that we present, and then there's a feedback loop that this creates that ties into how do we know we have that? And that's how we design a team alliance, and we found out that this builds tremendous engagement, and we're able to keep improving it moving forward.
All right, let me try to wrap up with some ideas on data, specifically on the enigmatic nature of effectively using data. There are several problems with data, vanity metrics being one, fear and emotion being another one, bias in the data being another problem. It's not a straightforward proposition to simply throw up some charts and think that it's going to help us improve. So we need to actually, like I said before, for us, we've had to establish an ethics around the data and a democratization of the data to have a healthy relationship there. We acknowledge different disciplines and are trying to build training content and coaching content to help teams understand the different disciplines associated with data. For example, data science is the discipline of making data useful, Analytics is an exploratory sort of activity where we really are looking for inspiration and trying to understand what questions we can ask. Statistics is about answering questions in the presence of uncertainty with rigor, right? And then we're looking later this year to apply machine learning to augment and automate decision making in certain areas and looking at pattern recognition of different signals in the charts so that humans don't have to do that. We're very keen on letting the data speak is kind of a phrase that we use. So a lot of times we do exploratory data analysis just to see what we see. And we don't have to have a predetermined outcome there. We're looking again for inspiration.
It takes off emotion.
Yeah. So we build our own data technology in Power BI. We have everything in Jira and Confluence. So we build all of our visuals in Power BI. We do actually a surprising amount of data analysis in SQL and PL SQL. We actually run Monte Carlo simulations in PL SQL. You can't really do that in Power BI, even with DAX, because it doesn't have enough procedural sort of logic to be able to do that. So we actually do a PL SQL Monte Carlo simulation. And then for kind of pattern recognition and machine learning, we do that all in Python. We definitely make heavy use of simulation to hedge our uncertainty risk. Again, later in the year, we'll do some fancier decision support type of capabilities. So here, we're not going to look at any improvement stories here. What I want to convey and what we teach are intuitions about the data. It's kind of part of the pedagogy that we have. We try to simplify things and have teams look for understand the intuitions, right? And so a couple of them here are, slope of delivery, right? That's a key one. We just can automatically just look at that. And we've got a lot of filters on top. This is all Power BI on top of Jira, right? So you've got a bunch of filters on top, and the combinations and permutations of those filters is a big number, right? So you really, when you try to get down to a single mode of the thing you're trying to predict, right, you can really get to some fine-grained sort of carving of the data with those filters. We look for bubbles in the line is the metaphor we like to use, right? A widening, right? When we see the bottlenecks forming, we look at the ratio of the arrivals and departures in the system, and we see if those are out of balance. If we have a lot more stuff coming in than going out, that's a problem, right? But they're intuitions. They're quick ideas that teams can latch on and make use of without having to be a data scientist to understand the stuff. This is how we kind of look at cycle time. So it says O2D. So we look at different segments of the value stream: upstream, midstream, downstream. O2D is end-to-end customer lead time from the time that the request is created all the way until it's completely done. And then we look at something called commit to done, right, which is kind of classic Kanban system lead time from the commitment point until it's all the way done. We have teams clamoring to understand how much time we spend from the commitment to build to the deploy queue. How much time do we spend in that local engineering time? Because we accumulate batches that we roll out in our legacy product that they sit there and queue at the end of the value stream for a significant period of time. So teams want to know, how long does it take us so we can locally improve what we're doing? But these are some examples of some of the things we built in Power BI. We've got a flow efficiency metric there. We put a regression line through the run chart, right? And so we use RMSE to fit that line through the data, and we're basically using that to understand the tilt of the data. So if it's tilted up, that means we're getting slower as a function of time. If it's tilted down, it means we're getting faster as a function of time. So we use that linear regression to understand the tilt of the data. So yeah, that's kind of
part of the coaching that we do following the workshop is for teams to include this in their retrospective. So that's really where the power is, because now every team member, not just the manager, they understand the patterns, they know what to look for, and they have meaningful conversations.
And so we use some classic data science tools like box plots, right? This is just a different way of visualizing a distribution as opposed to a histogram. I actually like this compressed view. The right whisker is the 85th percentile. So typically on a chart like this, you're going to see a 1.5 IQR whiskers on either side. Well, this one has just got the 85th percentile hanging out there. The red triangle in the middle is the mean, right, which is generally going to be shifted right of the median, right? It indicates the tail there. And this is looking at the three different segments. Each box plot is a different segment. So there's O2D, open to done, that's end-to-end system lead time. There's a commit to queue, that's that local engineering time. And then the commit to done is what you typically think of as Kanban system lead time and flow efficiency for each. And you can see how they're offset from each other. So we studied the central tendency of the distributions, the segment offsets, and we do some tail analysis on this graph as well. We do some interesting things. We measure the loops in the system. So how often does a ticket revisit a status that it was already in prior? So that's a direct measurement of waste, the more we do that. So we count the loops in the system, and we have a heat map, and then we also count age, days, and we see where the hot spots given a class of work and a position in the workflow. And this is the last bit, but we make heavy use of Monte Carlo simulations. This example is showing 3 simulations that have been run for a particular use case, but they have different throughput bases, meaning that the one on the left is based on the last 30 days throughput and the probability, the daily delivery probabilities for that. The middle one is based on the last 60 days. So the 85th percentile date is the same across those, which means that the throughput probability is more or less the same, whether it's the last 30 days or the last 60 days. When you go back to the last 90 days, the one on the far right, then you see the date pulls in by like 6 or 7 days, which means that we, greater than 60 days ago, we had a higher throughput rate than we have in the last 60 days. So when you do these simulations, right, you need to understand what is the basis for the simulation. Is it last 30, last 60, last 90? What's most indicative of the thing you're trying to predict, right? And we sort of look across these. And then if the business has need by dates, if the need by date is way in front of the 85th percentile forecasted date, then we look for mitigations, we look for new experiments to run, we take some action, some countermeasure there to mitigate against that.
And we look for opportunities to show the business how they can use this data next time they make a commitment.
Yeah, and this has been one of the biggest changes in culture, I guess, with the transformation. Is the organization embraces this approach now, and so much so that in 2021 there was a big strategic initiative where we didn't deliver any working software for a couple of years. So we came in and implemented our lean governance practices and simulation and the whole 9 yards. And we delivered the first release in 4 months. And then right after that, we killed the initiative because the forecasts were saying this is going to take years longer than you need. So we're just going to pull the plug on the whole thing. And we use simulation as a basis to divest that effort, which is great. So we killed the waste.
A successful failure.
All right, this is the last slide. You want to take it?
Yeah. So these are, in summary, our insights, and you can probably read them and take pictures faster than I can talk through them. I live to learn to see this happen in the past year. To me, the second one, adaptive patterns and auto-scaling, are key to efficacy. It's probably why Eric and I seen a lot of things in common when we've met in Istanbul 9 years ago in our approach, and then subsequent encounters we've had either working for Solutions IQ or for Accenture or at Adobe. Data and tooling and technology, and they're enigmatic and they need explicit long-term strategies. We're able to show this value and principle across the organization, and it's being enthusiastically embraced. Fear was fear in the beginning. Like, I don't know if I can ride this bicycle. But then once they got to ride the bicycle and they enjoyed the view, right? So it's very useful. And lastly, we relentlessly improve the delivery of services to customers. Everything is focused on customers' outcomes and results.
That's what we have. Thank you very much for your attention. I think we exhausted the time, though. So
yeah, we're in overtime, so thank you for your patience. But we'll be here next 2 days if you have questions and you want to see something. We share the slides, and we're happy to share whatever we have.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. you.